Good morning. My name is Amanda Jarvis, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 27 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one consulting services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Complying with Federal Alcohol Regulations, the Roles and Responsibilities of the TTB, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network and the Craft Beverage Assistance Program. Be sure to check out our next Craft Beverage webinar, Distributor Relations, Building Strong Mutually Beneficial Relationships with Your Wholesalers, on June 19th. We are recording today's presentation and it will be presented on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted, but if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's session. Len Lee, Investigator of Southeast District Trade Investigations Division, Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, or the TTB. Chris Van Orden is the manager of the Craft Beverage Assistance at the Virginia SBDC at George Mason University. Please join me in welcoming our panelists for today.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you everybody for joining us. So again, my name is Chris Van Orden. I'm the manager of the Craft Beverage Assistance Program at the Virginia SBDC. The Craft Beverage Assistance Program is designed to provide industry-specific guidance to Virginia's craft beverage sector. So today's program will be a free-flowing conversation about the ways in which breweries, wineries, cideries, and distilleries interact with the TTB. You can enter any of your questions into the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them either during or after the webinar. So I'm excited to introduce my speaker today. Len Lee is an investigator with TTB's Trade Investigations Division in the Southeast District, with a total of 32 years of law enforcement experience, including 14 years at TTB. Len works on a variety of alcohol and tobacco-related cases, including tax, product integrity, and permanent investigations. Welcome, Len, and thanks for sharing your expertise.
Good morning, Chris, and thanks for the Virginia Small Business Development Center for having us. We at TTB, we encourage everyone to ask us for these type of trainings because one of our main goals at TTB is compliance. So we really enjoy doing these.
Absolutely. Well, before we kind of dig into specific areas, can you give us a top line overview of TTB's main areas of oversight and what your role kind of looks like?
Yeah, so for some of those that may not be too familiar with TTB or where we came from, we're a relatively new agency in the federal government. We were formed in 2003. We were part of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, formerly known as ATF. When the Trade Center attacks happened in 2000, early 2000s, they created the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security pulled ATF from the U.S. Treasury over to the Department of Justice. Well, somebody in Congress says, whoa, there's a component of ATF that collects taxes, and we want that taxing function to stay with U.S. Treasury. So the decision was made to break us off and create the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, or TTB. We are a very small agency as compared to other government agencies. As of 2021, we only had 520 employees bureau-wide. TTB operates on a budget of $124.3 million. That sounds like a lot, but we are the third largest generating revenue agency in the federal government. Number one is our other partner at Treasury, the Internal Revenue Service, personal income taxes. Number two is U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and CBP is only number two because they collect our alcohol and tobacco taxes at the border. If they were not collecting those taxes at the border, then TTB would be number two. We collected last year a total of $20.3 billion with a B in alcohol and tobacco and firearms taxes. Again, that was either through imported products or domestically manufactured products. Tobacco accounted for about 54% of those taxes. Alcohol accounted for about 41%. And then the firearms and ammunition tax was about 5%. So when you look at our budget of 124 million, when we bring in 20.3 billion, we're a small agency, but we have a great return on investment. So, but here at TTB, our mission is 4 components. Number 1, we collect the taxes on alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and ammunition. Number 2, we protect the consumer by ensuring the integrity of all alcohol products produced in America and also imported. We ensure that only qualified businesses enter the alcohol and tobacco industries, and we prevent unfair and unlawful market activity for all alcohol and tobacco products. So that's kind of our core mission, is number 1, to collect the tax, and number 2, to protect the public.
That's great. And obviously that can take a lot of forms for different companies at different stages. And we're not going to be able to touch on every last thing that the TTB does, but hopefully we're going to be able to get into many of the particulars of how a company might interact with the TTB. So many of the folks in today's audience are in the planning stages. So their first encounter with TTB will likely deal with licensing. What should a pre-launch company know about obtaining their permit? And do you have any insights into the timelines or order of operations, just how they should kind of get started on getting properly permitted with TTB?
Yeah, great question, Chris. What I want to do today, I don't know about everyone in the audience, but I'm a visual learner, so I can hear it all day, but I really have to see it. So what I'm going to do in this Zoom webinar is I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to go to ttb.gov together. That's our main website for the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. And that will allow me to walk you guys through and let you see all of our resources and kind of where we need to go as we're talking. So again, this is our website, ttb.gov. And again, Chris says, what do I do when I want to start up and see how to first start the whole process? So simply we go to the Resources tab, and we would go over to Business Central. Okay, Business Central, you'll see you have all these categories. The very first one is, if we click here, how do you qualify with TTB? Applying for a permit or a registration. How to apply? We have a permits online system. We have a formulas online system, a COLAs online system. Starting a business, any different forms that you may need to find. We offer some great training online. How for you to stay compliant, applying for a label approval, and any data or stats that you may need. Excise tax, and search for labeling information. So as you can see, this is kind of a one-stop shop for you to really, either you or if you have someone asking, you'll know where to steer them to at ttb.gov for them to get the information to get the resources that they need. The great thing about on here, you see this industry startup tutorial. Anyone that calls a local office and say, hey, I want to start a winery, a brewery, a distillery, or I want to make a gun, or I want to make ammunition, I will take them to this webpage, tell them to launch this tool. And you see when you launch this tool, it simply asks you, what do you want to do? You will simply click on this and keep following this presentation through the system, and it will walk you through the entire application process and what is going to be required as far as documents and items to have for you to do that. So this is a great resource and really a great thing to start if you haven't applied for a permit yet.
That's great. And so if a company is kind of getting prepared for their permits, just, you know, a couple of pieces of information, what should they have in hand? Are there any kind of documents that they should have prepared before they get started?
And this is where, again, I emphasize this industry startup tool, because once you go here and we click on this, let's say we want to open up a distillery. Okay. Number one, we're going to decide who the applicant is, what type of operations, and then we're going to apply for the permit. You would click next, and then it's going to walk you through Again, are you a sole proprietorship? Are you an LLC or a corporation? So as you walk through here, Chris, it's going to show you what type of corporate paperwork you're going to need, what type of leases you're going to need, what type of equipment you're going to need. You're going to have to register your stills. So all as far as what you're asking, what type of paperwork is going to need for that application, if they keep going through this process, all these next questions, it's going to basically tell them, and again, you're not applying for a permit here. This is basically telling you what to have ready. So when you go over to TTB Permits Online and click Start a New Application, you're going to have all this paperwork sitting here on your desk, ready to scan and upload and to get your permit.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just going through and making sure you've got everything in hand so you don't start the process before you're actually ready. I mean, everyone knows this is a very highly regulated industry, and you can get ahead of yourself pretty quickly. So great to know that this tool exists. Once a company is operational, they're required to submit regular recurring filings. So what does that look like? How can a company make sure that they're handling this step correctly?
So again, if we go back to ttb.gov, to the homepage, and we go over to what we do, we'll be under taxes and filing, because again, we already have a permit. We are a winery, we're a brewery, we're a distilled spirits plant, we're a tobacco manufacturer, we're a gun and ammo manufacturers. We come down here and click on tax returns and reports due. And once again, this is going to tell us for 2022, the annual filer due dates, the quarterly due dates, the semi-monthly. If you are any of the TTB related industries and you pay less than $1,000 a year in taxes, and there are some people out there that are that small, they don't do much. Say a winery on a farm in the middle of Virginia, and they do it for love, but he wants to sell his wine. He may pay $800 a year in taxes. He would be under that $1,000 threshold, so he would file an annual tax return. Then, if you pay more than $1,000 up to $50,000, you would file a quarterly tax return. And then anyone that pays in TTB over $50,000 a year in taxes, you do a semi-monthly return, which is basically every 15 days you file a tax return. You click on here and basically it will show you what those due dates are. Okay? January 1st through March 31st, your return would be due by 4/14. So again, this is a good resource for you to go and actually see those dates. And operational reports, same thing. Operational reports are monthly reports. If you're brewing, you're making wine, you're distilling, there are operational reports that you have to turn in every month. These will show you what the due dates are and what reports are required. If you take alcohol and tobacco and you export them out of the country, these are the required documents and the due dates. And then, of course, we keep talking about these firearms and ammo manufacturers. They have certain dates on those as well. The one thing I really like about this tutorial, that every time we go out and we visit a plant in person, I take them to this web page and I tell them to go here. Basically, you can go to this automated reminder. You can click on this and you can register. And we're all busy in the world. We're all making beer, we're making wine, we're making spirits. And if you're that small of a manufacturer, what we will do, we will send you an email reminder and say, hey, your tax return's due. Hey, your operational reports are due. So this is a good little automated reminder here that you can sign up for free of charge. And we'll kind of email you in your busy days and say, hey, don't forget about us. You need to file this. We are still taking paper returns, paper tax returns, and paper monthly reports. We, at some point in the next few years, are going to get away from that. What we encourage everyone to do that are in the business now or thinking about starting, we want you to use pay.gov. Pay.gov is where you can file these tax returns and these monthly operational reports electronically. And the good thing about pay.gov is if we use paper reports, we're human. We can make an error. But with pay.gov, because line 14, the balance carries over to line 33, pay.gov, when you put all your data in and you go to submit that tax return or you submit that monthly report, it will automatically do a little audit. So if you put something in the wrong area, it's going to show warning. You cannot submit this return. The data is incorrect. And you'll go, oh yeah, line 14 was 125 and I put 128 in line 33. So I tell people it's the way to go. It's electronic. You don't have to mail anything in. And number two, it kind of self-audits for you to try to help you find any of those mistakes. And then of course, if you get really big and you hit the mother load, we do require anybody in a calendar year that pays over $5 million in taxes. And these would be the big boys in the world. These would be the RJ Reynolds. These would be the Jim Beam, the Diageo, the Brown Formans. You must pay your excise taxes by EFT, electronic funds transfer. It's just easier for us and it's kind of easier for them for those big payments. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, this covers 2022. If you needed to look back at 2022, and we go all the way back several years. So this is a really good resource page that once you get into business and you want to file those monthly records and monthly reports and returns, this is kind of, again, what we do, tax returns, report and due dates.
That's great. And this sounds like an area where, even if you're not personally inclined to using technology, this is an area where it can make your life easier. It doesn't have to be overly complicated.
Yeah, and that's why we put those self-audit features in pay.gov is because, we do find there is a small number a year that we're just making input errors on manual paperwork. And when we put that in pay.gov and we put that audit process in there, it really cut down the rate of returns that we had to send back because they were incorrect.
Yeah, that's great. And, you can go ahead and mark those due dates in your calendars now if you haven't done so already, but can't hurt to also have those automated reminders coming in. Just that is an area you do not want to forget about. You got to make sure you pay your taxes. It's a kind of one of the big parts of just running a business in this industry. So now let's say a company is, preparing its, quarterly or its tax payments, is filing its reports properly. Another area that they might be interacting with TTB is getting label approval prior to releasing a product. So can you share some details about the process, when it applies, and what a producer can expect if they haven't yet submitted a label for approval?
Correct. And we get this a lot. If you come here to the resources tab and you see here, we go down under data and stats, application processing times. Mm-hmm. TTB a few years ago, it took you about 60 days to get a label approved. The industry complained to Congress. Congress gave TTB a little bit more money. We hired more people. And basically now, if we come over here and we go to label application processing times, basically we tell you as of, boom, 5/23, a distilled spirits label will take you 4 days. A malt beverage label will take you 1 day. A wine label for 2 days. We're constantly updating this website, but we kind of want to emphasize to you because, again, the old mentality was, if I've got a product coming out at Christmas, I need to submit label approval like in October because it's a lengthy process. But now we want to use this to where if you've got a product that you need to get to market or somebody's come to you and they want to make this now, you can kind of see how long is it going to take for me to get that label approval back. And again, these are things to where we go down here. This is all done through COLAs online. You go in and submit your COLA. You can check for the status. Again, it shows here you log into your COLA's online account. Mm-hmm. And again, any of these accounts we're going to talk about today during the training, the TTB permits online, pay.gov, COLA's online, formulas online. If you're going to be new and getting an application with TTB, remember it's going to take you about 10 to 14 days for the registration process and for you to get a username and password. So that's where I tell people, don't think you're going to log in like a commercial software and you're going to get a username and password today. It does take a little bit of time. We've got to verify you've got a permit. We've got to verify you've got a bond. We've got to verify that you've got all your TTB stuff ready. And we're going to have to marry those accounts together. So I just encourage people, if you're a first-time user of COLAs, formulas, or any of the other databases, make sure you give yourself a little bit of time to get signed up and get a username and password.
Yeah, that is very important to know. Nothing in this industry moves quickly, but I've been around long enough that I remember back how long it used to get labels approved, and it is really nice that that some things have sped up, which is wonderful, but still always important to give yourself plenty of time in this industry. So that's the sort of timelines now, which is great for somebody who may be submitting their first COLA, certificate of label approval. What kind of, when would they have to do that? When is that not required? And what kind of information do they need to have on there?
Again, if we go hit our resources,
Mm-hmm.
who we are, what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go over here, you want to use this TTB audience. Are you a wine producer? Are you a distilled spirits producer? Beer? Are you a wholesaler? So let's say we're a wine producer. We want to click on wine, and it's going to give you everything you need to know about that industry. Chris just asked me about wine labeling.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you need to know as far as labeling, we're going to click here. And all this information, getting started with wine labeling. What is the mandatory information? What is the optional information? We need to apply for that label approval. What are the laws, regulations, and guidance? And then again, we've got examples down here. Wine under 7%, wine over 7%. We've got example labels. We've got a wine label tool. We keep going down. We've got more and more information. Again, I'm stressing our website because I think people don't understand that if they go to our website and use the resources here, it'll cut down on their time on the telephone. It'll cut down their time typing up an email. A lot of what they're looking for is on ttb.gov. We've really strived in the last 5 years to build this website to make it more user-friendly and to have these resources on here, because we know everyone's got a busy life. Everyone's busy in their commodities. And we really want to be able to come down here and get people up to speed pretty quickly.
Sure.
And again, at the end, if you still need to contact TTB, if you went through your entire web page, whether it's spirits, beer, whatever, this is the customer service number for the labeling division, or you can email them with this form. So if the last resort, you can call in, or this contact form, you can email your question in, and normally someone gets back to you within the day.
Great. And 2 specific questions about going through the labeling process with TTB. Does it have to happen for every label, or is it only when a company is engaging in interstate commerce?
And again, it differs per commodity. There are some commodities that require a COLA, and then there are some that don't. So that's where I would go over to the startup tool and see what's required. And we have put out some industry circulars on that. The big misnomer is people think, oh, it's interstate shipment, so I don't need a COLA. But you still have to file a COLA exemption. You still have to file and notify us, hey, I don't need a full COLA. I'm not going outside the state. And what we do with that COLA exemption application, we still look for, even though you don't have to have a COLA to go into interstate commerce outside of your state, we still check your COLA to make sure all the mandatory information, which whether it's in state or out of state, is still there. And again, just like we're showing you here on this web page, mandatory wine label information. So that has to be on there. So that's one of the misnomers people don't understand is Well, I'm only doing it in state. I really don't have to do anything but put my own label on it. Well, no, you don't. There still is some mandatory information that you have to have on there, whether it's beer, wine, spirits, or those three commodities.
And when somebody files that exemption, the COLA exemption, that's basically for that product, on into perpetuity. And but it's on a product level. Okay. And then the other question that came up was about the ABV tolerance for each product type.
Yes.
I assume that's on the website, what TTB, if you're allowed to go plus or minus 0.2% ABV.
Correct. And that's where we will go over here to what we do.
Mm-hmm.
We will go over to the regulations. And then simply you will go down to whatever you're doing. Are you doing distilled spirits?
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing wine, or you're doing beer? Okay, let's say we're doing distilled spirits. Mm-hmm. It's going to take you to the regulations, and then you will simply look up the regulations for proof and fill. And again, you can search up here, or if you already know it like I do, you can look at the table of contents. Sorry, I've got to work around our blocks here. 19,356. Distilled spirits, alcohol content, and fill. You bring up the regulations for distilled spirits. This is the percent. Fill can be off. So for 1 liter and above, you can be plus or minus 1.5%. From 376 to 999, you can be plus or minus 2% on fill. And again, variations in alcohol content. Alcohol content cannot exceed 0.3% of volume above or below stated on the label. So for a distilled spirits product, if you're making an 80 proof vodka, you can be 79.7 proof to 80.3 proof. And if we send that product into our lab and we test it, it will be compliant for proof with the label. So this is where, again, if you come to the website and you look at the resources, the answers are there.
That's great. Yeah, very important to know what standards you're being held to in this space. So that's the sort of labeling side of things. Obviously, very important for, people are putting out all kinds of products these days. So let's say that somebody is now creating a product that has a composition that maybe departs from typical formula. They may need to go through formula approval process. So how does that work?
Yeah, and again, we go to the resources page.
Mm-hmm.
And if we come over to those processing times, that will bring us to formula applications. Okay, so part of the formula applications tool is basically we will show you, as of these dates, these are the averaging processing times for a formula. Okay, so it's about 7 days for a distilled spirits, a malt beverage, or a wine formula. Mm-hmm. Again, we go down. There's other resources down here about colas and for permit processing times. Mm-hmm. And again, if we want to learn about the formulas, we go over to resources, TTB audiences. Okay, I'm a brewery. We go over to beer, and we look over for formula approval. And again, we can click on here, and this is going to tell us, based upon what I'm making, the basics before submitting, after, ingredient information. So these are formula guidance. So these are all the good resources, so I can determine, based upon what I'm making, am I making a standard beer? Am I making a beer with a TTB already approved ingredient? Or am I making a beer, one of the interesting cases I had in Virginia, we got a consumer complaint on a brewery. It's about 5 years ago when The Walking Dead was a very popular show. They were making a Walking Dead beer, and they were making a beer with pig brains in it. So the question was, I had to go research to see if they were using food grade pig brains in the TTB approved formula in the beer. So that was kind of one of those things to where we do care about what you're putting into products. And there are some things that are approvable. There are some things that are not approvable. Another example, we had a guy about 10 years ago wanted to do a peppered vodka. Unbeknownst to me, there is a peppercorn out there that is toxic. Well, guess which one he wanted to use to make his peppered vodka? He submitted that in his TTB formula application, and that is where the guys in formula have a master database of all flavorings, food, yada, yada, yada. So when they cross-reference this ingredient, they cross-reference every ingredient you list on a formula, they come back to him and said, sir, you can't use this peppercorn. It's not food grade. You have to use something else. So the TTB formula is there as a way to protect the consumer. That other TTB mission, not collecting the tax, we protect the consumer. We protect the consumer by the label application, the proof in the fill. We want to make sure if Chris goes into Total Wine and More and gets a $7.50 bottle, he's getting $7.50. If he's getting a wine that says 14%, they're getting, within the tolerances. And then the formula approval. The formula approval really comes into play to protect the ingredients because some people are allergic to things. That's why if there's red number 40, if there's yellow, if there's certified colors, if there's like on wine contains sulfites, some people are highly allergic to sulfites. So the formula process ties into the cola process, and the label protects the consumer. So when they grab that bottle, they know it's safe for them to consume. So that's kind of how all these things tie together and why some of this stuff is required.
Absolutely. And, obviously we tend to think we know what's in a lot of these products. Beer, typically kind of 4 core ingredients. There are some ingredients that may depart from that. Is that there's a list of that people can look up of approved ingredients that say, for instance, a lot of days, there's beers with coffee in them these days.
Right. And yeah, if you go over to the beer page, on the beer page, if you go under the formula resource for beer, it will have that list there. I haven't been to the beer page in a while, but maybe it's here. And again, this is where you would click here and start this formula approval tool. So if you put in, say, cherries, or you put in another one of the approved flavors, it's going to tell you once you put in for that, you do not need a TTB approved formula for this product, because this tool knows what the approved list is and what needs approval and what needs a formula. So this is a good interactive tool to use, whether you're spirits, malt beverage, or wine. Basically, once you put in what you want to do, it will tell you you either do or you do not need to file for formula approval.
That's great. Yeah, lots of room for innovation in this space, and there's process. Even if you're the first person to use it, or if it's not formally approved yet, there are mechanisms in place, but making sure that you're doing the right thing. If it needs to be listed on the label, it'll tell you all of that information. All of these pieces fit together. Nothing is, acts in a silo here. So obviously we've already touched on kind of a lot of the ways that, that the different product categories behave, right? Just even looking at this formula approval process is going to be different depending on what product you're making. Are there any other important ways in which the regulations differ for breweries, wineries, distilleries? Anything that people should know?
Only that they are vast differences between the three. And again, we encourage you to go to the resource page, what we do, go down to the regulations tab. And again, I tell everyone that calls me that wants to start a brewery, start a winery, start a distillery, start here, go to the regulation page and read part 19. If you want to open up a distilled spirits plant, look at all the rules and the regulations. If you want to start a winery, read part 24, read part 25 for beer. Know what you're getting into before you go spend the money, rent a space, buy equipment, and then figure out, I didn't realize it was this hard. So, but if you read the regulations and you know what the requirements are, and the requirements are a little bit lax for beer compared to distilled spirits, because beer is the least taxed commodity. Beer and wine, the tax is a lot low compared to distilled spirits. And that is why people sometimes ask me, well, you can make wine and beer at home, but you can't distill. I said, yes, it's because of the level of taxation. You can make beer and wine at home up to 100 gallons per person per year, but you can't distill any spirits because it's too big of a tax loss to the federal government. So when I explain it to them that way, they say, well, I get it. So, but these are the biggest things, Chris, is what I see, because everybody just wants to jump in and open a brewery, or jump in and open a winery, or jump in and open a distilled spirits plant, but they don't know what all of it entails. And I really don't have the time to sit on a phone and walk people through like a 3 or 4 hour training dissertation. I tell them simply, go to the regs, click on the regs, and once you get to the regs, it's going to tell you, what do you do to qualify? What equipment you have to have in place, what security you have to have in place, what bonds you have to have in place, what records, reports, and returns you have to keep. And if after you've read all this, your head's still on tight and it's not spinning, then you're good to go.
Mm-hmm. It is, if you're not comfortable with regulations, this may not be the right industry for you. And I think it's important to really emphasize how different the products can behave when it comes to both federal and state regulations. If you have experience in beer and you want to get into spirits, it's not just one-to-one translating over that experience. It's a related but a different industry. So make sure that you're educating yourself on all of those differences, because you can get into deep water fast.
Yeah, and some of the biggest problems we've had recently is there's a craze for craft breweries to open up a craft distillery in the same building. And that's fine. We can do that. But people think that they can just have the beer tanks here and the distilled spirits tanks here. No. You can apply for 2 different commodities in the same building, but we're going to require a wall and separation between the bonded distillery and the bonded winery, or the bonded distillery and the bonded brewery. Because again, we've got to keep those 2 different tax classes separate and apart.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest problem we're finding nowadays is we're walking into one of these hybrid situations where they're both, and they're basically just sitting right next to each other. And that's not per the regulations. There has to be some type of permanent segregation. It can't just be a line on the floor.
That is very helpful. Just, if it's putting up a demising wall, just to be on the right side of regulations.
It can be a solid wall. It can be a chain link fence all the way to the top. Whatever type of physical segregation you want to put up, but it can't be a yellow paint line on the floor.
I feel like we could, spend a whole hour talking about, co-locating 2 different, alcohol manufacturing plants, but I know that's a particular issue for another day. But I will say, if there's any takeaway for all of this, it's go through everything that's available on ttb.gov. The information is largely there. And once you've made it through that, getting in touch with TTB to talk about the particulars, but educate yourself, with what's available first. So, so that's basically, kind of some major issues when it comes to the sort of regulatory space when, for breweries, wineries, distilleries. TTB also monitors trade practices to ensure that there's a level playing field for small producers. Can you share some of the issues that TTB addresses here and what that means for Virginia's craft producers?
Yes. About 4 years ago, several different lobbying groups between beer, wine, and spirits came to Congress and says, hey, we've got this little problem out here in the market. It's out of control. We want you to give TTB money to enforce trade practice, basically leveling the playing field. So whether you're the smallest distillery with 1 pot still and 1 product, or your Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, or Bacardi, the playing field should be level. That's called the FAA Act, the Federal Alcohol Administration. So one of the things we did, we hired a group of what's called special operations investigators. There are about 8 of them across the country. And the only thing they do is they work trade practice cases. We started off that group with doing major trainings and conferences around the country, Miami, New York, San Francisco, Seattle, LA. But one of the other things we did, because we get questions just like Chris gave me, what can you tell me about trade practices? We were getting so many of that stuff that we said, you know what, we're going to make some videos, some professional videos, and put them on our website. So people who can't fly to Miami or fly to New York and attend one of these conferences, you've got all this information readily available that you can watch and understand. So those resources are, if we go to the resource tab and we go over here to the guides and tutorials, you see down here at the bottom, TTB Trade Practice Video Series. These video series explain the history leading up to trade practice rules, defines the regulated terms, and walks you through the 4 prohibited practices. So again, these are really good if you're a manufacturer and you're a wholesaler. Again, the first video, which is 16 minutes long, goes into the FAA Act, the history and the background, and then the 4 types of problem areas. One is tied house evil. The second is exclusive outlet, commercial bribery, and consignment sales. So this is something that, again, I'm not one of those investigators. I do work with these people. I do know a little bit about this, but as far as specific answers and questions, you can come over here and watch this video series. We have also a slideshow here that you can go through. And then, of course, once again, if you still have a specific question or concern, you can either call in direct or you can email and someone will get back to you within a day. What I'm emphasizing through this entire training and through this today, to everyone watching, TTB encourages you to be proactive. Reach out to us first with questions. Yes, we're an enforcement agency. We don't work with a hammer. We want to be proactive, and we would rather help you on the front end, either be compliant or tell you how to get compliant, than to come out and deal with the problem and take enforcement action. Okay? So once people kind of understand that about TTB, it kind of puts them a little bit more at ease. But I encourage you, reach out to us, reach out to the TTB office in your area, and build that relationship, ask the questions, use the resources on here to reach out to the different headquarters divisions, whether it's ALFD for labeling and formulas, whether it's trade practices, or whether it's trade investigations or our audit division. Whatever you need, TTB, for anything, we will help you in any way.
That is great. Yes, I know TTB is, sometimes people are a little afraid of what TTB means for their business. It doesn't have to be scary. And again, putting in this work on the front end can really make things way, way smoother as you're up and running. You know, there's not so many hours in the day, and doing it right the first time is really going to make your life easier. So we obviously covered a lot of ground very quickly. Are there any other elements of TTB's role in the industry that we either didn't touch on or that people aren't aware of? Any tools or resources that maybe we didn't speak about?
Yeah, it's always funny because, again, people really think of TTB because, like I explained that pie at the beginning, the amount of taxes collected, there is a small component of TTB that most people ignore. And that's, we do regulate the firearms and ammo manufacturing in industry. So anyone in America that builds a gun or makes ammunition, TTB permits them and we collect a tax. Once that gun or ammunition leaves that factory and then goes into the marketplace, that's where it transfers over to our sister agency, ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. ATF really nowadays, they have alcohol and tobacco in their name, but if it doesn't blow up or come out of a gun, they tell you call TTB. So
Right.
we handle the alcohol and tobacco, they handle the firearms and explosives. But the firearms and ammo manufacturers, again, we collect about 5% of that $20 billion a year in taxes for firearms and ammunition excise tax. The rest of our taxes go into the general fund of the government to make all of us sustain for the US budget. The key difference that people don't know is that 5% that's collected in firearms and ammunition tax, we don't keep a penny. All that money is given to every state in America, and all that tax revenue basically allows the states to put on hunter safety and gun education programs in their states. So basically the firearms and ammo industry does pay a tax, but that tax goes straight back to educate the consumers of how to safely hunt, fish, and to use those type of commodities.
Sure.
So people are kind of shocked when they hear that. Yeah, we collect the tax, but we don't keep a penny.
Sure. And one other area that we didn't touch on, well, I think we briefly mentioned it, was export, like the export-import side of things. I know that there are some tools that are available for people who might be interested in selling their products internationally, or people who might be interested in importing products from foreign markets. Is there somewhere on the portal for people to turn there?
Yeah, what we do, we come over here and we go to TTB audiences. And again, we have a whole section for importer exporter. The key is with importations, if you're bringing a commodity into the country, beer, wine, spirits, or tobacco, it has to be labeled and have all that mandatory information, just like anything domestically produced. And the biggest problems we find there is when they're making it overseas and sending it here, you need to make sure you need to tell them what has to be on the label, because a lot of times we catch stuff coming in, and we hate to see that people spent all this money buying a product and shipping it all the way across the water, and now it has to sit at customs because it's not labeled correctly. So the key with importation is the labeling. And exportation, again, we've got exporting alcoholic beverages, importing alcoholic beverages. All that stuff is on here. As far as the export stuff, we don't care about any of that. I don't look at labels for export. I don't look at formulas for export. I don't look at any export products. What TTB cares about is you have to maintain certain documentation to show that that product did go out of the country, so you can claim and not pay taxes on it. So what we really home on those export products is the documentation that it did properly go out of the country. But again, we don't look at label approval. We don't look at standards of fill proof, because once it goes into that country, that's their problem. So like, we care about what's coming into us. You need to ensure, because before you send a shipment, and every country is different. I'll use Japan as an example. Japan, if your label of, say, Len Lee whiskey says 80 proof, well, they're going to test it. And if it's 79.99, they're going to turn that shipment around. In Japan, they are very rigid. There are no tolerances. It has to be at label proof or higher, or they will ship that shipment back out. So that's why, if you're getting in the export business, I caution people. A lot of people look at that as, oh, I could make money this way. That's a good market. But you have to understand, do your due diligence, do your education, and make sure before you spend $25,000 sitting in a container from here to Australia that you're meeting all the requirements, so Australian Customs doesn't turn it back around. Because I've seen that happen to a couple of people, and unfortunately the two instances I saw, these were small guys, and it put them out of business.
Yeah, that is a whole different set of regulations to learn. And if you're interested in that, you can come to the SBDC and our international team for that side of things. But there's definitely some helpful tools that TTB has here. Well, given that we have just a few minutes left here, there were a couple of questions very specific that I was gonna see if you might have the answer for, Len. So somebody asked about cooking wines.
Yes.
So rice cooking wine with salt added. Does TTB get involved for that process?
You can send those into our TTB lab and you can ask for them to be analyzed. It has to have more than 5% sodium to make it non-potable. We caution people. I did work a case in LA where it was Chinese cooking wine, walked into a warehouse. I counted, I think there was 400,000 cases. We tested we sent the wine up to our lab in Walnut Creek, California, and it came back with 2% salt in it. So they basically had to destroy every case in that warehouse. So either use external lab testing at your disposal, or you can submit a sample to TTB and ask them if it meets that's called a non-beverage product. But just be very careful. We do routinely test those because people do try to send in stuff as cooking wine and it's a regular spirit. They're evading taxes.
Yeah. So just another area, make sure you've got your processes down.
Correct.
Great. There was a question somebody said, I'm purchasing the assets of an existing brewery and leaving it all in the leased space, changing the name to my own name. Is there any specific information online I should be looking for? Is it like any other startup? Will the current owner need to give up his permits? He's retiring before I apply since it's the same address.
Basically, what will happen is you will need to apply for a brand new brewery, go to the industry startup brewery, and basically it will tell you what documents you need to apply. You will to apply, and part of that process, you will explain to your permit application specialist at TTB that you are submitting a bill of sale and that it's going to go from the old owner to the new owner. And basically what will happen is they will keep that on file. And when your brewer's notice gets approved, they will deactivate the old brewer's notice for the other owners. So, and that's the same way with a winery or distillery. You will need to submit that bill of sale or that contract with that winery or that distillery or that tobacco manufacturer. And basically they will invalidate the old permit when your permit gets issued. And basically you will start on and rock forward as the new business. That's a common thing. It happens a lot. So once you get in the TTB process, your specialist will know what to advise you to do. But it's pretty simple.
That's great. Yeah, obviously the sales, complicated for lots of reasons, but it doesn't have to be when it comes to the TTB permitting. So
correct.
Wonderful. Well, I know that there's obviously plenty more particulars that people could have that they might want to get into here, but I want to make sure that that people know to kind of go to the website, look up these details on their own, and then if they can't find what they need or if they have particular questions on their case, they should absolutely be reaching out to TTB. So please do not be shy. So
yeah, and the one last thing I want to tell everybody, if you go over here to who we are, and I told you about building that relationship with TTB, you click on the TTB offices. This is going to show you all of the offices, and field operations is where you need to be looking at. This is the tax audit division, and this is the trade investigations division. So if you want to reach out to an investigator in your area or an auditor in your area, you will click on this, and basically it will bring up the offices. And inside the offices, it will have interactive district map. And this will be the same on the audit website. So if you're in Virginia, it will show you you're in the yellow. Basically, you will go and you will contact information page for the particular office. You'll be in the southeast. And this will basically show you which office is in your area and who to contact. So this is a good resource here, the TTB offices And again, this has all the offices. So labeling, the scientific service division, if you've got that question about the salt or any proofing or filling of your products, this is our lab. This is the NRC. This is where you file your permits, your applications. So this is a really good page here to kind of, how do I contact that person at TTB? This will kind of show you all those different offices.
Great. Awesome. Well, Len, I really appreciate you, going over all this information with us today. It's obviously, we could talk a lot more about all the different things that TTB does and the resources that are out there, but I think it gave a really good overview of what TTB does and what's available for people who are, in this alcohol manufacturing space. So thank you so much for those insights, and thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will say again, each month we do a new session in our craft beverage conversation series, much like today. Next month on June 16th, I'll be speaking with Julie Rose about distributor relations. You can find more details and register at Virginia SBDC. But for now, I'd again like to thank you, Len, for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thanks. I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. So I just want to let everybody know that you're all going to receive an email with a link to the recording, and be sure to check out the next webinar, as Chris mentioned. I also put our contact info in the chat. If you have questions or wanted to request one-on-one counseling, you can email help@virginiasbdc.org. Thank you all so much for attending, and we hope to see you at the next session.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.